Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saritam Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitam Shah Om Agyantimirandasya Gana Jana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militamena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Ina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Janmadhyasya Tanvaya Ditarata Sharte Shrabhigya Swarat Tene Brahma Ridhaya Radhikavaye Muhyanti Asuraya Tejo Vari Mridam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Svena Sadhana Rastakuakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Om Tat Sat. Okay, we're going to look at a couple more verses from this Hamsaguya prayer. So Daksha has taken his rebirth. He's trying to repopulate the universe. He's not doing a sufficient enough job. So he goes to one mountain, forget the name, Amarashana, I forget the name of the hill. And he begins offering this Hamsaguya prayer, some old Vedic prayer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that he may be empowered to do the work of generating the living entities or populating the universe. That is the meaning of Daksha, actually. Daksha means expert. So expertise here is expert in having the children. That is his expertise in this context. But even for that expertise, he needs to pray to God to be empowered to do that work, as one can only imagine. So he offers this old Vedic hymn known as the Hamsaguya prayers. So we had started looking at those prayers. And the first verse he had mentioned, well, among the many qualities of the Supreme Lord that he mentions that he is Adrishta Dhamne. So the word Adrishta Dhamne means he's unable to be perceived by the jivas in this world. Guna Tattva Buddhibir, whose intelligence is entangled with the various elements of material nature. So it's called the Guna Maya, right? The Guna Maya part of Maya. Maya Shakti has two parts, Jiva Maya, Guna Maya. So the Jiva Maya part eclipses our self-awareness, and the Guna Maya part causes our identification with the various gunas. So we all entangle with the gunas of nature, so we're not aware of anything beyond that. So the Lord is Adrishta Dhamne for this reason. He's not perceived because we're too preoccupied with the external sense objects. So our awareness of the Lord is obfuscated because of this. In the next verse, he gives an example. He says it's just like the sense objects which cannot know the senses which reveal them. So for example, our sense of sight reveals the sense object, which is form, but form cannot know the sense of sight, right? Or another example, our sense of hearing reveals the sense object, which is sound, but sound itself cannot know the sense of hearing. So in the same way, just like that, we do not know the Supreme Lord. So just as the sense object cannot know the sense which reveals it, so the jiva cannot know the Supreme Lord who reveals the jiva even. That's the idea there. So a question may come up, well, how is that possible? Because the sense objects, of course, are inert. They don't have consciousness, so that's why they cannot know the senses that reveal them. But the soul is having consciousness, it has awareness. So the soul should be able to know the Supreme Lord, basically. So the jiva, in his ontology, the jiva is consciousness and conscious, right? So he's essentially consciousness, but he's also conscious of objects outside of himself. Just as the sun is essentially light and it's also luminous. So ontologically speaking, the jiva is consciousness and is also conscious, aware of things outside of itself. So basically the question is being asked, how come the consciousness of the jiva cannot also know the Lord? Just like my consciousness as an attribute reveals you. I'm seeing you, I'm able to interact with you. So God is also just another living entity. So why can't the consciousness of the jiva also reveal him? That is the basic hypothetical question, which seems to make sense. So then the next prayer of the Hamsaguya Stotra wants to answer that. So now I'll share my screen. That's where we left off. So this is I've given the hypothetical question that may come up for which this verse is being cited. So here's the verse. Deho savaksha manavo bhutta matram atmanamanyam chavidu param yat sarvam puman veda gunam shatajgno na veda sarvagyamanantamide. Translation: because they are only matter, the body, the life airs, the external and internal senses, the five gross elements and the subtle sense objects, form, taste, smell, sound, and touch, cannot know their own nature, the nature of the other senses, or the nature of their controllers. But the living entity, being, because of his spiritual nature, can know his body, the life airs, his senses, the elements, and the sense objects, and can also know the three qualities that form their roots. Nevertheless, although the living being is completely aware of them, he is unable to see the Supreme Being, who is omniscient and unlimited. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Okay, so the verse is saying, the first line is a list of all the elements of material nature, the body, the life airs, the different knowledge acquiring senses, working senses. Manava means the internal sense. So that means the mind, the intelligence, and the ego, and the chitta. Bhuta means of gross sense elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether. Matra means the sense objects, which are their causes. So smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. So atmanam anyam chavidu param yat. Sarvam puman veda gunam shatachgnam. So the living entity, the puman, he is able to know all of these things. And again, that's because of his quality of consciousness as an attribute. So his consciousness in terms of his nature, and he's also having consciousness as an attribute. So he is able to know all of these things. Veda gunamscha. And he's also able to know the gunas, which are their underpinnings, because everything in the material world is produced from the three gunas of material nature. So he's able to know all of these things. But it's saying here, Tajgyo means he's able to know all of that. But na Veda sarvam gamanantamide. But he is not able to know the omniscient, unlimited. So sarva gyam means omniscient, and anantam means infinite or unlimited. So that's a word for God. So Ide, I'm offering my obeisances unto that omniscient, unlimited Lord. So here the meaning is twofold. For the conditioned jiva, he's not able to know the omniscient, unlimited, because he is, as already stated, he's preoccupied with the gunas of Prakriti. So that's why he's not able to know. Actually, it's not impossible to know, but he's not able to know because of his preoccupation with Maya. Just like the verse in Gita that's coming, Itra dvesha samutena dvana mohena bharata sarabhutani samoham sarga yanti parantupa. So Krishna says, from the very beginning of our birth, sarga yanti parantupa, as soon as we come out of the womb, completely deluded, samoham. And now we are coming out enlightened. Nowadays, people talk about the indigo children.
Star children.
The star children and all this. No. As soon as you come out of the womb, some moha. Moha means bewildered. Some yakmoha, completely deluded. Comprehensively diluted. Diluted by what? Duality. Dvandva mohena bharata. What is duality? Ichva dvesha samutena. The imprints of ichva and dvesha means desire and hate. So because of being so absorbed in desire and hate, then your absorption isn't towards that which is beyond desire and hate, or the Supreme Lord. So this is one reason why the living entity does not know the Supreme Lord. I think after that verse, so that's verse 27, Gita 727. Then 728, Krishna says, Yesham twantagatam papam jananam punyam karmanam. So persons who have come to the end of their sinful life, this means basically, if you have a lot of tamagun, a lot of rajagun is there, so you're doing a lot of sinful activity. But then if you start to calm down a little bit of sattva is appearing. That is called antagatam papam, the end of the sin. So a little bit of sattva is appearing. So when you have a little bit of sattva, you can appreciate something that has value. When you don't have sattva, you can't appreciate anything that has value. In fact, that will just have value when you're in tamagun, you see it as opposite. What is the use of this thing? Just like nowadays, for example, if someone is reading, someone is talking about what is the use of this reading? What is the use of this philosophy? Like metaphysics, people don't think metaphysics has any value anymore. What is the use of metaphysics? We have science that tells everything. What is the use of ontology, theology, metaphysics? They're no use. So this is tamagun. That which is having the value, they'll see it as opposite as having no value. And then Rajagun means, Raja means the dust. So that which is have value is just obfuscated by desires. So you're not able to appreciate the value because you're covered by Raja. So then that way you do a lot of sin. But when Sattva Gun hits a little bit, then you start to be able to appreciate things that have actual value. That's why I used to joke in Chicago that ignorance is bliss until the Sattva hits. Then when the Sattva hits, you start to suffer because now you see things what they are, what is supposed to be, you start to appreciate the value. So Yesham Tatakatam Papam, the sin is coming down, the Sattva is appearing. So then you get Sadhu Sangha at that time. By good fortune, of course, Brahmanda Brahmite Konda Bhagyavanji, if you're fortunate, then you get Sattva going, you have a little Sattva, you appreciate what you can get from Sadhu Sangha. Then from that Sadhu Sangha, you get a piety, a special type of piety, of course, devotional service, punya, shravana, kirtana, that sort of piety. And then from that piety of devotional service, when it increases more and more, nirdvanda moha nirmukta, you become free from dualities. Because Krishna is saying in the previous verse, due to absorption and the imprints of dualities, you remain deluded. So the opposite condition is freedom from dualities. So how do you get free from those dualities? Well, there should be a destruction of your sin and the manifestation of the piety. So this piety is devotional service, but that's how our commentators comment on it, our Gaudiya devotees. And yeah, when the piety becomes very much, then they're dvandva moha nirmukta. You become free from the moha created by dualities. Bhajante mam drida vrataha. Then you do Krishna's bhajan with firm determination. This verse is coming. So you can know God. The point of saying all these two verses, God is knowable, but he is generally not known because he's preoccupied, because the jiva is preoccupied with the gunas. So here in this verse is saying a living entity, he can know by his own quality of consciousness as an attribute, he can know everything in this material world to a certain degree, of course. But the Supreme Lord, he does not know if he's preoccupied with these gunas. But then there's a jiva mukta. These sorts of jivas who are jiva muktas, they can also know the Supreme Lord. Tat gyo, so this word tat gyo, the word tat here can refer to the Supreme Lord also. Like in the phrase tat tamasi, you are that. So there's, in this verse, there's the tat padartha gyan and tvam padartha gyan. Tat padartha gyan means the knowledge of Brahman, tat. And tvam means the knowledge of the jiva. So the Advaitavad view of this statement is that the jiva is Brahman, tat tvamasi, you are that, thou art that. Of course, the Vaishnavas, we don't accept that explanation. But these two knowledges are there, Tat Padarthagan, Tvam Padarthagan. So Tat Gyo means you can know Tat, you can know also Brahman, you can know the Supreme Lord. But because he is unlimited, you cannot know him comprehensively. So that is the meaning of not being able to know the Supreme Lord here. According to Prabhupada's purport and Sri Vishnu's purport. Na Veda Sarvam Gyam Anantamide. That Lord he does not know because the Lord is unlimited. That is the meaning here. Because he is Ananta or infinite, so he cannot be known comprehensively. He can be known, but not completely. So 2 verses are quoted in this regard. One nice verse is here. This is from the prayers of the personified Vedas. Yupataya eva te nayayur antamanantataya. So there's the first line I'm saying, because this is the point that's relevant to the verse. Because you are anantataya, unlimited, neither the lords of heaven nor even you yourself can ever reach the end of your glories. So this is the first line here. Even God himself cannot reach the end of his glories. Just as he's coming to the conclusion of it, then the glories are expanding. Ananda Buddhivardhana. Then again, he has to chase. So another nice verse here that I was remembering. This is from Brahma Stuti to Krishna. Jananta eva janantu kim bahuktya name prabho manaso vapusho vacho vaibhavam tavagoptara. This is a nice verse. Brahma is saying here, there are people who say, I know everything about Krishna. Jananta eva. So persons who think like that I know God. So Janantu, let them say like that. As far as I'm concerned, I do not wish to speak very much about the matter. Oh my Lord, let me say this much. As far as your opulences are concerned, they are all beyond the reach of my mind, body, and words. Manaso vapusho vacho vaibhavam tavagoptara. Your vaibhavam, your opulences, are beyond the mind and the words. This reflects a very a Taittiriya Upanishad statement. In the Taittiriya Upanishad, there's a section called the Ananda Vali section, the creeper of bliss. And there's giving a gradation of happiness in the world. So I think the first unit of happiness, this is the first unit of happiness. You should be the emperor of the world in good health. All your subjects love you. And you obviously have opulences to enjoy it. That's considered one unit of happiness. So we're well below the 1 unit mark of happiness, well below it. And then that's the starting point. That's the starting point. And then from there, it goes up to Gandharva, Devata, and then all the way up to Lord Brahma. So he's having the topmost happiness within matter. And then after that, it speaks about Brahman, the happiness of Brahman. And when speaking about that, it says the happiness of Brahman is that which the mind returns without being able to say anything about it. So in other words, its bliss cannot be measured in terms of the units of happiness that we were able to measure the material empirical world. So it is a very blissful state. So it cannot be known by the mind and words, basically, or articulated by words. So that, of course, that is true of Krishna. So manuso vapusho vacho vaibhavam tavagoptara. So the mind and words return without being able to say anything about it. So Brahma is saying, for those people that I know God, let them say like that. But actually, as far as I'm concerned, what can really be said? You can say something, of course. Now that you should say nothing, that is atheism. Because I don't know anything about God, I'll say nothing about him. I'll only talk about matter. So that is the atheism. So you should say something about God, but you cannot say entirely. So in this way, you don't know. So this is the meaning here. So next verse we'll cover and then we'll pause. So who can actually have perception of that Supreme Lord? So we heard this Jiva Mukta. He is having perception. And these Jiva Muktas are of 2 types. So the Jnani Jiva Mukta and the Bhagavat Jiva Mukta. Right? The Jnani and the devotee, basically. Those are the 2 types of Jiva Muktas. And so they have different realization of the Supreme Lord, right? Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti, Shaptite. They have different realization of the Supreme Lord. So these realizations of the Supreme Lord are considered, relatively speaking, easier or harder. So according to the commentary we'll see from Prabhupada also, the realization of the Brahman feature is considered easier. It is easier to get that realization. And then realization of the Bhagavan feature is harder. So these two terms are used in the verse or purport, Sugeyam and Durgeyam. So Sugeyam means the easy knowable object. And Durgeyam means the difficult knowable object. So the easier knowable object is the Brahman feature. So this next verse of the Hamsapuriya prayers is speaking about that. This is a nice verse also. So we'll look at it here. Yado paramo manaso nama rupa rupa siddhrishta shmriti sampramoshat yayate kevalayasva samstaya hangsaya tasmai shuchi satmane namaha. So when one's consciousness is completely purified of the contamination of material nature, gross and subtle, without being agitated, as in the working and dreaming states, and when the mind is not dissolved, as in Sushupti, deep sleep, one comes to the platform of trance. Then one's material vision and the memories of the mind, which manifest names and forms, are vanquished. Only in such a trance is the Supreme Lord revealed. Thus, let us offer our respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Lord, who is seated in that uncontaminated trance state. So, yada uparama manasa. When the mind is basically, uparama means the complete cessation of thoughts. So this is like in the yoga system, they say like this, chitta vritti nirodha. There's no thought basically. Uparama manasa. So the way was talked about in the commentaries in Prabhupada's translation, the mind has three states basically, Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti. So Jagrat means the waking state, like now, maybe. At least we all look like we are awake. But that's called Jagrat, waking consciousness. So that is a type of agitation. Why is he calling me now? Sorry, I'm being distracted. Then there's the Swapna. Swapna means dream state. So that is also an agitation of the mind. That's why generally the jivas know no peace, as I always joke about this. As soon as you wake up, the mind begins. As soon as you wake up, and then finally the whole day is going like that. While you're passing stool, while you're taking a shower, while you're cooking. Finally, you want to get a little bit of respite from this. And then you sleep and you dream. So this is called Jagrat Swapna state, their agitation of mind. Then the last state, Sushupti, means deep sleep. So deep sleep means when the mode of tamas. So Jagrat is Sattva-guna, Swapna is Rajaguna, and Sushupti is Tamaguna. So in Tamaguna, there's a suspension of all the mental faculties. So the mind, ego, buddhi, all of that is suspended. And you only have awareness of non-awareness. Because the tamas is very thick that time, very thick. So you're aware that you're not aware of anything, basically, at that time. But there is no words for that sort of awareness. Because now the jiva is disconnected from the faculties that allow him to articulate things, right? The body and language and mind and thoughts and ideals and symbols. He's disconnected from that. So the Sushupti is sometimes described as like samadhi. The difference between samadhi and Sushupti is samadhi is Sattva-guna and Sushupti is Tamaguna. But sometimes they're given as comparison for this reason. So Uparama Manaso refers to the samadhi, the cessation of the vrittis of the mind is referred to samadhi. So it is like deep sleep, but it is informed by Sattva-guna. That is the difference. And so in that state, one is having awareness of the pure I without its connection with the composite eye. I know, actually, composite eye means, composite means composed of different parts, right? So our empirical self is a composite eye, right? It's composed of gross elements and subtle elements. So it is a composite eye. And then you have the original eye, which is in the Atman itself, right? So the Atman is the true referent of the eye. And the composite eye is imposed upon the true eye, the soul. But when you're in Susupti or in the Sattva-guna Samadhi, then only the intrinsic eye is operating that time. It's disconnected from the composite eye. And so you have awareness of the eye without any connection to any apparatus or content. So this is called Uparama Manaso. So this is further clarified by this compound word here. Nama Rupa Rupasya Drishta Shmiti Sampromoshat. So Nama Rupa Rupasya means names and forms, right? That is part of the composite eye. Drishti Shmiti Sampromoshat. So Sampromoshat means the destruction of Drishti and Shmiti. So Drishti means perception. It means empirical perception here. And Shmriti means remembrance of those empirical things. So that is destroyed in the state of Samadhi. Because all the thoughts are, extinguished in that state. So this is referring to the Samadhi. So at that time, Yai yete kevala yasung sangstaya. Hangsa tasmai shuchi satmane nama. So my obeisance is unto you, the Supreme Lord. Shuchi Satmane, you are known for a person who is in this pure state of mind. So who is that? That is known, that is the Brahman feature here. So he is known, the Brahman feature is known in this pure state of mind. He is perceived in aloneness. He is perceived in aloneness. This is a phrase that is referring to Brahman. So for one who is in pure mind, you can know this. So I incidentally was thinking of a verse when I was reading this. And then I later on looked at the commentaries and the same verse was quoted, interestingly. So there's a verse from Brahma Stuti. It's kind of a technical verse, so I don't want to get too much into it because I have the commentary here in front of me for this particular verse. But I might just try to gloss it now because it's kind of a headache verse. But this verse is describing who can the adhikar for someone who can perceive the Brahman feature. So in order to have perception of Bhagavan, there has to be adhikar. You have to have a certain adhikar to have the perception of the Lord. Not that he's revealing himself to any nonsense. So for the Brahman feature, what is the adhikar? So that is described here. It is same to the verse we're hearing from Hamsapulya prayers. But here the first line, Tatapi Bhuma Mahima Agunasrite. So the word Bhuman refers to the Supreme Lord who has unlimited qualities. So his Mahima, the glory of that Supreme Lord, in this context, the glory of the Supreme Lord means his quality as Brahman. Agunasrite, mentioned here is Agunasrite, means without qualities. So Brahman, of course, is having qualities, Brahman as Krishna. But Brahman refers to the lack of perception of the relationship of the qualities with the object. As we mentioned many times in this class, in the material world, you can have perception of an object without its qualities. In Jaya, they say that every perception is having two moments. The first moment is you just perceive it that there is something there. And then the second moment, you perceive it as something. Or sometimes if you are looking at something in a shadow, right, you can see that something is there. Like sometimes when you wash the clothes, when you're a little lazy, you don't want to fold them right away. So you just let them stay there for over the night. And then you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't tell if there's a man there looking at you. They as children, we have such experiences like this. So you cannot tell what the quality is. What is that? What is that? You forget temporarily because you're coming out of Thomas. What is that? What is that? So it's something is there, but you cannot see the relationship with the qualities with the object. So this is called the indeterminate perception. So Brahman is like that. God has qualities, but you don't see the relationship of the qualities with the object. So it's called the indeterminate perception. So agunasrite, your glory, what is without qualities. So this is the Brahman feature of the Lord. So vibhodam arharti amalantar atmabi, that form of the Lord, one is able to know if they are pure at heart. Amala antar atmabihi. So they have to have a pure heart. In the Hamsa prayers we're looking at, Shuchi Satmane. There should be purity of the inner world in order to have that realization. So what is that purity? Avikriya swadnubhavat arupato. That purity is by establishment in one's own self. Swa anubhavat. So anubhavat means being established in perception of one's own self. So being established in perception of oneself. Now, generally, perception refers to a transformation of the mind to mimic the object that it's looking at. In other words, when we perceive anything in the material world, it's not direct. It's through the mental state. So what happens is the senses perceive some object, and then the mental state takes the shape of that object. And then consciousness looking at the mind is looking at the shape that the mind takes. And then that's what we call as perception. That's why 5 different people looking at the same object can see different things. It depends on their mental state. So generally, when you have perception of an object, it's just a transformation of the mind. But the self is beyond the senses, and therefore cannot be an object of perception. Because to see something means to be an object of the senses perception. The self is beyond the senses, it cannot be an object of perception. So how can it be seen? And because the mind won't be able to take any transformation if it's not an object of the senses. So here it says, this person is established in his own self, which is avikriya, without transformation, and arupato, without form. Because form, again, is something that is a sense object or object of the sense of sight. So here it refers to the self that is perceived in the state of samadhi, just saying it very easily. There's a lot of commentary on this particular verse. I'm not we can read it, but it's very long. So we're not gonna do that. Avikriya swa anubhavat arupato means a perception of the self that is perceived in samadhi. So the self is arupato here, without form, and avikriya, without transformation. So, okay, even if that is true, how can he know the Brahman? Because Brahman is an actual object that's infinite and all-pervading. And the self is just very small. So how can being situated in self-realization be equated to Brahman realization? They're actually 2 different substances. So here, the last line of Brahman Stuti is saying, Ananya bodhyatmataya, because of awareness of non-difference from Brahman, and in no other way is this considered as Brahman realization. So Ananya bodhyatmataya means because of his awareness of the non-distinction between himself and Brahman. So Brahman is also avikriyat and arupito. So the self is also like that. He's just like a small version of that. So by awareness of the non-distinction of this, he is said to have Brahman realization. Although his Brahman realization is really just him understanding his own self as disconnected from the body-mind complex. And then understanding that that nature is not different from the Supreme Brahman. And in no other way is he having, or is it possible even to have Brahman realization? Not cha anyata means there's no other way this is possible. So obviously the purity, amala antar atmabi, the purity here is the cessation of the connection with the body-mind complex through spiritual techniques like yoga or bhakti. And the commentary to this verse by Jiva Goswami, he does point out to us that even this state, though, is made possible by sadhana bhakti and not otherwise. Because Brahman realization is ultimately beyond the gunas. And so to go beyond the gunas, one needs the help of bhakti. Like Mam Chayo Avyabhicharena, Bhakti Yoga, Mam Chayo Avyabhicharena, Bhakti Yogena Sevate, Saguna Samati Daita, Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate. You can go beyond the gunas and know Brahman only by Bhakti Yoga. So he brings in that point also here. Still, this is possible by Bhakti Yoga, but this is the purity here. So this is considered the easy realization of the Lord. If you are able to go into the samadhi and stop all the connection with the body-mind complex, it's considered as easy realization of God. So then, if that's easy, then what's the difficult one? So we'll hear about that some other time, tomorrow. But this is the particular verse here. Interesting enough, I suppose. Okay, so we're going to pause there. Anyone want to say anything or ask some question? So comment is here. Shangopi is saying, since the Vedas only say that Krishna is unlimited, and we saw 10:14:38 where Brahma is confessing he couldn't know the Lord completely. And how can we understand the authoritative scripture, Vedas, are enough? And also, there are examples, Brahma, who could know the Lord by reading the Vedas. So the Lord is unlimited. And your question is, how can we say that the Vedas are enough? Enough to do what? It's enough to get us in the door. Then after you get to the door, you're standing at the shore of an ocean of truth. So just like if you say, I know the ocean, that is also a true statement, and it's also not a true statement. If you're standing at the shore of the ocean, you are looking at the ocean, so you know something of the ocean. But the ocean is so vast and so deep. What do you really know about it? So the Vedas can get us into the door of how to commune with that reality. Then once you're communing with that reality, it's an ever-expanding ocean of blissful awareness. Anandam buddhi vardhanam, pratipadam purnamrita aswadanam, right? Pratipadam purna amrita aswadanam, tasting the purna amrita at every step as the ocean of bliss is ever expanding. Anandam buddhi vardhanam, right? So that is, in that sense, the Vedas are enough. They give one the process by which you can get your foot into the door of such a communion. And then after you're communing with God, then it's an ocean of bliss. Go and drown in it. That's the idea. You're quoting, yes, from second canto, as Brahma read the Vedas 3 times, still says he can't understand. That's what I meant. No, so that verse from second canto says he studied the Vedas 3 times and concluded that Reti unto Bhagavan is the import of the Vedas, right? That's what it says in that second canto verse. That's 2.2. I think it's 2.2.32. So he studied Vedas 3 times. First time he said karma. Then he studied again, he said, no, Gyan. Then he said it again, he said, no, Reti unto Bhagavan. This is the import of the Vedas. So one should develop that Reti. So that's what I'm saying. Reti means Sadhya Bhakti. So when you have Sadhya Bhakti, then that means you've communed with that reality. By having communed with that reality, then you're entering into an ocean of ecstasy and transcendental form and ever-expanding bliss. So then what can you know about it? Even the Bhav Bhakta, even the Prem Bhakta. In fact, aside from Reti, there are different degrees of Reti, right? Reti is the how do you say, the foundational ecstasy. But then after that, there's Prema, Sneha, Pranaya, right? Man, Raga, Anuraga, and then Mahabhava is there. These are all the different degrees of the Reti. And according to the limit of your Reti, you'll have a understanding of that ocean of bliss. So Mahabhava, the Mahabhav Reti, the love that is characterized by Mahabhav, knows that reality most completely, right? And is able to taste that reality in its most complete way. So Krishna himself, he wants to take the position of Mahabhav Sarupini Radha, right? So he can understand the limit of his own unlimited nature, so to speak. Vedi Lobat, he has greed for this. He's greedy to embody the Rati characterized by Mahabhav, giving him access to qualities that lower levels of Rati do not have access to, right? So like this, Rati only gets you in the door. And after that, it's a whole ocean of joy and delight. That is being fun. Okay. Anyone else wants to say anything? That is the question that I see in the chat box. Okay. Okay, so we'll, oops, yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hello.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I have a question. You know the list that I think is given in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of the percentage of qualities that these different entities can have, like Bhagavan and Lord Shiva and
Yes. Yes.
So is that can that be correlated to capacity of understanding Bhagavan, or is it just having the same qualities?
I mean, intuitively, I would say it could be equated to some extent, right? If you have a similar quality as an object, then you're able to understand that object to some degree, right? And if you don't have such quality, then it's very hard to understand a particular. Just like now, just for example, I would say that the average human being is generally good. Foolish, we may be, but generally good people, like moral people. So it's very hard for such good people to get inside the head of a very evil person. It's very hard for them to imagine, even though they watch so many movies about psychopaths, whatever. All these movies now that are coming out, they're all about psychopaths. Joker, Riddler, there's Penguin. That's when I was growing up, Batman series. Mm-hmm. These people are like psychopaths. I think one of the popular TV shows I heard of 2020 on the Netflix was You. That was the name of the show. And You was about a psychopath who was like killing women. And people were like totally into it. It was like, so even though people are watching this sort of nonsense about psychopaths, it's very hard for them to get inside it's very hard for them to believe that people can actually be like this. And so because they don't have that quality, so they can't really relate to that object or entity who's like that. It's very hard for them to understand. So in a certain sense, having certain qualities can be equated to a certain awareness or appreciation of a particular object that is having similar qualities. I don't know if I don't think that's how it's used there in the BRS there. But it would make sense to me also that it would mean that.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu. And then just one follow-up. Like, how does that even work with someone who's unlimited, having 78% of unlimited qualities?
Yeah, it doesn't. That is Prabhupada's way of talking, because the list is telling 64, right? So we're in the BRS, we're getting 64 main qualities. I forget how it's for, these are 64 like prominent qualities, with 4 that are particularly peculiar to Krishna's form. So out of 64, if you take, a partial number of that and divide it by 64, then you get these percentages. So Prabhupada was telling like that. If 50 qualities divided by 64 equals or whatever. So you can get some percentage like this, but it doesn't really have any meaning there when you're talking about an infinite entity. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
These sorts of things are just to help us try to understand. Just like we will hear from Upanishad that the soul is 10,000 the tip of a hair. So what is a tip of a hair also? Someone's going to ask what type of hair. Negro hair or, white people hair, or what type of tip of a hair? And what is 10,000 the tip of the hair? It's something you can't even really conceive of, honestly. So some numbers given just to express the inconceivability of it. So if it's taken too literally, and you said, no, we must figure out. No. It's just used as a pedagogical tool. Another example in Gita, when Krishna showed the universal form, it was said it was like 1,000 suns that arose simultaneously. He was in the universal form like 1,000 suns. Well, you cannot conceive of such a thing also. So it's just telling like that. But you cannot conceive of 1,000 suns arising simultaneously and what that will look like. Even one sun is too much.
It would look black.
It will look black.
You'll go blind.
You'll go blind, right? Even one sun, you look at it for too long, finished. So 1,000 suns, how you will imagine such a darshan like that? So like this is also like the poetry. So in poetry, when you have to express things that are subtle and hard to conceive, you have to use poetry to do it. Just like if you have to express love. Like nowadays, the rap, one of my friends tried to tell me that rap means rhythm assisted poetry. I was like, I don't know about that. Maybe in the 80s, but rap today is rhythmic assisted, I don't know, poop. Rhythmic assisted poetry. So they try to express their feelings for a woman in some of the raps you hear. So we'll not repeat that because it is inappropriate. But you can see that it's very gross and very unrefined and disgusting. Poop. I think this is a proper word here. It is poop only. So, yeah. So, but if you actually love someone in your heart, then you have to express that love. Then you have to use poetry to do it. You express their appreciation for their eyes, for their form, for their lips. You have to use poetry to do. So all these things, when you're talking about something subtle like the soul, or like Arjuna having darshan of the Lord's universal form, you're using poetry to describe it. So not to be taken too literally, what is 78% of infinity? So not to be taken literally. Just a way to help teach and help us appreciate.
It's 78 divided by infinity.
Thank you. I'm very bad at math also. Okay. All right, so we'll stop here then. Unless someone else was to say anything. So Hari Om Tat Sat. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Sorry for I'm looking like an unlocked character on a video game. So Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai. Go Premanandi Hari.